Hi, it's Grandma here, and I'm reading Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain, and I'm going to begin with chapter 27. Now, if you remember in chapter 26, Tom and Huck went to the haunted house to find treasure, and instead, Injun Joe and one of his friends came, and they had the treasure, but they found the tools that Huck and Tom were going to be using, and they had fresh dirt on them. So instead of leaving the treasure behind in the haunted house, they took it with them. The young detectives. The adventure of the day mightily tormented Tom's dreams that night. 4 times he had his hands on that rich treasure, and 4 times it wasted to nothingness in his fingers as sleep forsook him and wakefulness brought back the hard realities of his misfortune. As he lay in the early morning, recalling the incidents of his great adventure, he noticed that they seemed curiously subdued and far away, somewhat as if that had happened in another world or in a time long gone by. Then it occurred to him that that great adventure itself must be a dream. There was one very strong argument in favor of this idea, namely, that the quantity of coin he had seen was too vast to be real. He'd never seen as much as $50 in one mass before, and he was like all boys of his age and station in life, in that he imagined that all references to hundreds and thousands were mere fanciful forms of speech, and that no such sums really existed in the world. He never had supposed for a moment that so large a sum as $100 was to be found in actual money in anyone's possession. If his notions of hidden treasure had been analyzed, they would have been found to consist of a handful of real dimes and a bushel of vague, splendid, ungraspable dollars. But the incidents of his adventure grew sensibly sharper and clearer under the attrition of thinking them over. And so he presently found himself leaning to the impression that the thing might not have been a dream after all. This uncertainty must be swept away, so he would snatch a hurried breakfast and go and find Huck. Huck was sitting on the gunwale of a flatboat, listlessly dangling his feet in the water and looking very melancholy. Tom concluded to let Huck lead up the subject. If he did not do it, then the adventure would be proved to be only a dream. "Hello, Huck." "Hello, yourself." Silence for a minute. "Tom, if we'd have left the blamed tools at the dead tree, we'd have got the money. Oh, ain't it awful?" "'Tain't a dream, then. 'Tain't a dream. Somehow I most wish it was. Dog it if I don't, Huck." "What ain't a dream?" "Oh, that thing yesterday, I've been half thinking it was." "Dream? If them stairs hadn't broken down, you'd have seen how much of a dream it was." "I've had dreams enough all night with that Spanish devil going for me all through 'em. Rot him," Huck complained. "No, not rot him. Find him. Track the money." "Tom, we'll never find him. A feller don't have only one chance for such a pile, and that one's lost. I'd feel mighty shaky if I was to see him anyway." "Well, so'd I, but I like to see him anyway and track him out to his number 2. "Number 2? Yeah, that's it. I've been thinking about that, but I can't make nothing out of it. What do you reckon it is?" "I don't know. It's too deep. Say, Huck, maybe it's the number of a house." "Goody! No, Tom, that ain't it. If it is, it ain't in this one-horse town. There ain't no numbers here." "Well, that's so. Let me think a minute. Here, it's the number of rooms in a tavern, you know." "Ooh, that's the trick. They ain't only 2 taverns. We can find out real quick. You stay here, Huck, till I come." Tom was off at once. He did not care to have Huck's company in public places. He was gone half an hour. He found that in the best tavern, number 2 had been long occupied by a young lawyer and still was occupied. In the less ostentatious house, number 2, was a mystery. The tavern keeper's young son said it was kept locked at all times, and he never saw anybody go into it or come out of it except at night. He did not know any particular reason for this state of things, had some little curiosity, but it was rather feeble, had made the most of the mystery by entertaining himself with the idea that the room was haunted. And noticed there was a light in there the night before. That's what I found out, Huck. I reckon that's the very number 2 we're after. I reckon it is, Tom. Now, what you gonna do? Let me think. Tom thought a long time. Then he said, I'll tell you. The back door, that number 2, is the door that comes out into that little closed alley between the tavern and the old rattle trap of a brick store. Now, you get hold of all the door keys you can find, and I'll nip all aunties, and the first dark night we'll go there and try 'em. And mind you, keep a lookout for Injun Joe, because he said he was going to drop into town and spy around once more for a chance to get his revenge. If you see him, you just follow him. And if you don't go to that number 2, then that ain't the place. Lordy, I don't want to follow him by myself. Why, it'll be night. Sure, he might ever see you. And if he did, maybe he'd never even think anything. Well, if it's pretty dark, I reckon I could track him. I don't know. I don't know. I'll try. You bet I'll follow him if it's dark, Huck, while he might have found out that he couldn't get his revenge and be going right after that money. It's so, Tom. It's so. I'll follow him. I will, by jingoes. Now you're talking. Don't you ever weaken, Huck, and I won't. Chapter 28. Huck Mounts Guard. That night, Tom and Huck were ready for their adventure. They hung about the neighborhood of the tavern until after 9, one watching the alley at a distance and the other the tavern door. Nobody entered the alley or left it. Nobody resembling the Spaniard entered or left the tavern door. The night promised to be a fair one, so Tom went home with the understanding that if a considerable degree of darkness came on, Huck was to come and meow, whereupon he would slip out and try the keys. But the night remained clear, and Huck closed his watch and retired to bed in an empty sugar hogshead about 12. Tuesday, the boys had the same ill luck. Also Wednesday. But Thursday night promised better. Tom slipped out in good season with his aunt's old tin lantern and a large towel to blindfold it with. He hid the lantern in Huck's sugar hogshead, and the watch began. An hour before midnight, the tavern closed up, and its lights, the only ones thereabouts, were put out. No Spaniard had been seen. Nobody had entered or left the alley. Everything was auspicious. The blackness of darkness reigned, the perfect stillness broken only by occasional mutterings of thunder. Tom got his lantern, lit it in the hogshead, wrapped it closely in the towel, and the 2 adventurers crept in the gloom toward the tavern. Huck stood sentry, and Tom felt his way into the alley. Then there was a season of waiting, anxiety that weighed upon Huck's spirit like a mountain. He began to wish he could see a flash from the lantern. It would frighten him, but it would at least tell him that Tom was alive yet. It seemed hours since Tom had disappeared. Surely he must have fainted. Maybe he was dead. Maybe his heart had burst under terror and excitement. In his uneasiness, Huck found himself drawing closer and closer to the alley, fearing all sorts of dreadful things, and momentarily expecting some catastrophe to happen that would take his breath away. There was not much to take away, but he seemed only able to inhale by thimblefuls, and his heart would soon wear itself out the way it was beating. Suddenly, there was a flash of light, and Tom came tearing by him. "Run!" said he. "Run for your life!" He didn't have to repeat it. Once was enough. Huck was making 30 or 40 miles an hour before the repetition was uttered. The boys never stopped till they reached the shed of a deserted slaughterhouse at the lower end of the village. Just as they got within its shelter, the storm burst and the rain poured down. As soon as Tom got his breath, he said, "Huck, it was awful. I tried 2 of the keys just as soft as I could, but they seemed to make such a power of a racket that I couldn't hardly get my breath. I was so scared. They wouldn't turn in the lock either. Well, without noticing what I was doing, I took hold of the knob, and open comes the door. It wasn't locked. I hopped in and shook off the towel, and great Caesar's ghost." What did you see, Tom?" "Huck, I almost stepped into Injun Joe's hand." "No." "Yeah, he was laying there sound asleep on the floor with his arms spread out." "Lordy, what did you do? Did he wake up?" "No, never budged. Drunk, I reckon. I just grabbed that towel and started." "I'd never thought of the towel, I bet." "Well, I would. My aunt would make me mighty sick if I lost it." "Say, Tom, did you see that box?" "Huck, I didn't wait around to look. I didn't see the box. I didn't see the cross. I didn't see anything but a bottle and a tin cup on the floor by Injun Joe. Yes, and I saw 2 barrels and lots more bottles in that room. Don't you see now what's the matter with that haunted room?" "How?" "Why, it's haunted with whiskey. Maybe all them temperance taverns had got a haunted room. Hey, Huck." "Well, I reckon maybe that's so. Who'd have thought such a thing? But say, Tom, now's a mighty good time to get that box if Injun Joe's drunk." "It is that. You try it." Huck shuddered. "Well, no, I reckon not." "And I reckon not, Huck. Only 1 bottle alongside of Injun Joe ain't enough. If there'd been 3, he'd be drunk enough and I'd do it." There was a long pause for reflection, and then Tom said, "Looky here, Huck. Let's not try that thing anymore till we know Injun Joe's not there. It's too scary. Now, if we watch every night, we'll be dead sure to see him go out sometime or other, and then we'll snatch that box quicker'n lightning." "Well, I'm agreed. I'll watch the whole night long, and I'll do it every night, too. All you got to do is trot up Hooper Street a block and meow. And if I'm asleep, you throw some gravel at the window, and that'll fetch me." "Agreed, and good as wheat. Now, Huck, the storm's over, and I'll go home. It'll begin to be daylight in a couple hours. You go back and watch that long, will you?" "I said I would, Tom, and I will. I'll haunt that tavern every night for a year. I'll sleep all day, and I'll stand watch all night." "That's all right. Now, where are you going to sleep?" "In Ben Rogers' hayloft. He lets me, and so does his pap Sniggerman, Uncle Jack. I tote water for Uncle Jack whenever he wants me to, and anytime I ask him, he gives me a little something to eat if he can spare it." "That's a mighty good nigger, Tom. He likes me 'cause I don't ever act as if I was above him. Sometimes I'll sit right down and eat with him. But you needn't tell that. A body's got to do things when he's awfully hungry. He wouldn't want to do it as a steady thing." "Well, if I don't want you in the daytime, I'll let you sleep. I won't come bothering around. Anytime you see something's up in the night, just skip right around and meow." Okay, next chapter is called Huck on Injun Joe's Track. And again, we have that picture at the beginning of a gun, a knife, and a rope. So that always makes me nervous because that's when they get into trouble with Injun Joe. It's when we see that at the beginning of the chapter. Anyway, what do you think? Do you think the boys are going to lay their hands on that box? Or do you think that they're going to get caught by Injun Joe? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Bye-bye.